everyone. I am Carla Kopp. I am a game designer, developer, and publisher. And we're on the game design live chat. The guest this week is Molly Zeff. She runs Flying Leap Games and has designed the $1 Million Doodle, Wing It, and Wing It Beyond. Molly, tell us more about yourself.
Sure. Good to see everybody. Really excited for today. And I think that I wanted to flag that Flying Leap Games is a company that grew out of initially a passion project, but I came from, and it turned out to be very helpful for my board game company. I came from seven to 9 years, if you count business school or not, in social enterprises. So mission based for-profit or nonprofit organizations that you know basically fight poverty through the market, through providing jobs or providing better incomes. And working on a social mission has really influenced how I think about the game industry. I'm someone who needs to wake up every day and really care deeply about what I'm doing as having a social mission in the world. And I believe that games have this incredible power that I'm sure we've all felt around a table to bring together people from extremely diverse backgrounds and actually build friendships and build entire communities. And I've seen that in action. One of our main designers, we have two, but one of our main designers who has been with us through all three games and will hopefully be doing the fourth one as well, is a refugee coming from both South Korea and Uzbekistan, actually. So a South Korean Uzbekistani American refugee. And she mentioned at one point that her cousin, who had just come to the US a couple years earlier, took our first game, Wing It, to his conversation club at community college with kids from all different backgrounds, all different countries. And they just played Wing It for hours and they really bonded. And the touching part was that he said it was the first time since moving to America he felt like he really connected with people. So that was really cool to hear about, that it was really a force for building connections between people of really different cultural backgrounds. And we've since then and before then heard that our games have been used with kids who have autism, have used to, just deepen family relationships, have given away for people to avoid politics at holidays. That's another piece of feedback we've gotten. And so knowing that there's a strong social mission to what I do has been really awesome. And I guess I would just secondly say, other than that social mission piece coming from my background in years in nonprofits and social enterprises, that I've also lived in 9 cities and had to start over a lot. I've lived in West Africa and Ghana. I moved to Alaska for a time during the pandemic, and I've lived in all different places all around the country. And so I think that having to kind of make friendships quickly and try to build relationships deeply and network to get jobs in places has been really helpful in the game industry, because getting to know your retailers at a personal level has been really helpful for me, and getting to know other designers and publishers as well. Having the background and kind of diving into a new city and getting to know everyone really quickly is a skill that I definitely bring into the game industry. So those are 2 points I wanted to flag about my background.
Well, that's super interesting. I didn't know all that about you. Well, especially like all the different places you've lived and um that you make a really good point about the social mission and like having a reason to get up and do what you do. But also I agree with like how games can just bring people together. Like that's really like what I like about it too. Like I the thing I'm doing, like if I do it well, then I make people happy. And that is just it makes things a lot, like, easier to, like, push through and, like, to do things that aren't, like, so fun, like all the emails and things like that.
Yeah, I know entrepreneurship is extremely hard. Running a board game company is really hard at times, but yeah, knowing the social mission is there is helpful. And I often use Billy Joel's line to frame another more broad mission that I do think is important to flag, which, Billy Joel says in his song Piano Man. He's one of my favorite singers, by the way. He says he helps people forget about life for a while as the piano man. And I always think that a lot of what games do for us is they make us happier, because they're a way to briefly for 1 hour just escape into a theme or escape into just cracking up at a crazy party game together. And I think that having forms of escapism when life is hard is extremely important social mission as well.
Mhm. Definitely agree on that. So today our topic is about, growth in retail. So how did you even get started getting your games into retail stores?
Sure. So the very first retail stores were ones that I literally just walked into because they were local in some respect. And I put local in quotes, honestly, because we broadly define local as where we were living or had lived, or places, even one place that we visited a lot. And so initially, I got into retail just through our Kickstarter by walking into stores in New York or St. Louis. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. I'm from St. Louis, where I am currently, and my co-founder was in Boston. So walking into stores in Boston was a first mover for us, and it was just kind of hand selling, person to person. Hey, we're local. This is who we are. And I often hear from designers that those are the first places they will get into, is the local places. We were only in, though, 11 stores in 4 states and 4 cities when I went to my first GAMA trade show, the Game Manufacturers Association trade show. And it was extremely life changing. And I might tell this story a little later how this all happened. But basically, due to one night at a bar at GAMA, and there was cheese involved and a little group of retailers, we ended up exploding into close to 60 stores and selling out of our first print run. So GAMA was really the way that we got into the next 50 or so. And beyond that, we'll get into later.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like Gamma, I went to my first one in 2020 and it felt like it was going to be life changing, but also then a pandemic happened. So it wasn't as great as I thought it would be at the
Right.
start of the week. But yeah, Gamma was really, really good.
Yeah, for people who went for the first time in 2020, I told them, don't judge your gammas by that, by your success by that, because it's very different when stores are suffering, obviously. They're not going to be able to buy as much. California stores shut down the following Monday after Gamma, for example. So I had orders from California I put on hold for months. So I totally understand that. It'll be different in other years.
Yes. 2020 is a very different year for so many reasons.
Right.
Um, so, what's the best way to approach a retailer? Like, you talked about when you were local, you would just walk in. Like, would you call them ahead of time, or like, what would you do?
Sure. So I'm going to focus on the two main ways that I've done this, that meaning the two main ways I've grown in retail. And just as sort of the headline of information for people who don't know watching this, basically we, as I mentioned, for their first Gamma, went from 11 to just about 60 stores in 4 weeks, but also because of Gamma grew into 7 countries really quickly. And I'm going to explain how that happened briefly, and then also want to touch on how we kind of grew to our next 250 plus stores, which was largely through personal visits and through some limited cold calls, and then also future gammas. So I want to start with the personal visits. This is the main way that I grew for a while. Outside of gamma, which is, 1 week a year, you obviously need to find ways to reach new retailers. And I decided to do extremely low cost trips to very specific cities and regions that had a number of stores, and just cover anywhere from 4 to 6 stores a day over the course of a week to a few weeks. And I want to caveat that I was doing this full time, but there are ways to do it that I'll explain that don't involve being full time necessarily. And what I would do is pick major cities that were fairly easily accessible or close together, and that I could reach, without a lot of a high cost. So, for example, this sounds crazy, but even though I was living in Brooklyn, for my first huge trip, I chose the coast of California because I was able to find Southwest flights for, anywhere from like 130, 150 between cities. I had friends in some of the major cities or families, so I was able to stay with people and keep hotel costs low, which at that time early on was especially important, or Airbnb costs rather. And I was able to hit four cities, about 3.5 weeks. There were some Jewish holidays in there, so I'd say over 3 weeks, close to 40 stores. I think it was like 39 stores. And it was really easy to combine it with PAX West, because PAX West being in Seattle, I could just get to Seattle early or stay late and hit all the stores in the Seattle area. So I think that highlights a few things. One, can you get to a place cheaply? Two, is there a high concentration of stores in the area? Three, do you have free lodging? That's actually huge, especially when you're starting out. That makes a big difference for our finances. And 4, can you combine it with a convention or even another trip? So if you're at another job, working any kind of job full time, and you do any travel for it, or you never travel for it, but you travel for vacation, almost any city in America will have, a handful of stores nearby, any bigger city, and some will have a lot. So, for example, when people are starting out, the number one city I now recommend to go to is actually Salt Lake City. Of any city in America, Salt Lake City has the highest concentration of board game stores, local chains, and local franchises. And so you can hit, easily 20 in 4 days. And that's what I did. So in terms of kind of bang for your buck, return on the investment of your flight or car ride or whatever, Salt Lake City is a way to go. And I also think that combining with conventions when calling stores is really important. And what I would do is I would, figure out what convention was near different stores. So, like, for example, Origins is in Columbus, Ohio. Ohio has dozens and dozens of board game stores. So I found out what cities they were in and just drove in a big circle. The nitty gritty that you were referring to, I want to get to as well. I kind of wanted to start
Mhm.
high level. So the nitty
Yeah.
gritty, I Google a city and board game stores. I figure out what stores are in a city. I look at number of reviews and I look at how they describe themselves. So if they have over 100, 200 reviews, I'm more likely to go. If they talk a lot about Magic the Gathering, I'm less likely to go. I'll still go sometimes and I might sell a few games, but the problem is that they might be mostly trading card focused, and a lot of those stores will have like one big shelf or a couple big shelves with board games. And if you sell board games, that means they'll probably buy one or two at a time. So is it really worth driving, say, 20 minutes or 30 minutes out of your way, having, say, a half-hour visit? My visits can be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour easily, and then only selling a game or two. It's not really worth it. I've had to come to that realization over time. I used to hit every single store in an area no matter what, and I realized at some point that I was actually wasting some of my time because some, board game stores or trading card stores are really about the trading cards, not about the board games. And then I guess in terms of your other question, I will always call and ask the day before, the week before, usually it's a few days before. I will ask if I can speak to the board game buyer, if there is a game buyer, there usually is. I mean, there has to be for most stores. So if I can speak to the game buyer who does the game buying, I'll ask. Then I find out when that manager or owner is in. And this is super important because if you're trying to do all of LA in 3.5 days, that's a fair amount of stores, and you want to hit a certain area on a Thursday, and you drive a half hour out of your way to hit a store, but that manager is only in Monday through Wednesday and the weekends, then you just wasted over an hour of your time, right? And I have had situations like that happen when someone didn't end up being in. But you always have to call in advance just to make sure the right person's in, and to just let them know you're coming and see when a good time is. Because they'll give you the time of day if you ask for an advance, but if you don't, it'll be really iffy as to whether you'll get the time. And as busy as they are, it's good to find out what times of day are less busy. So I find, for example, in the morning, shortly after they open, the ones that don't open at noon, if they open between 11 and 12 or even at 10, they'll be less busy about a half hour into that often. Or in the early afternoon before kids get off school is a pretty good time. So those are some times I try to aim for, and I usually try to hit like 4 or 5 in a day.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like I've had different things. Like I fully agree with like calling beforehand because I've tried to get my games into one of my local stores, and I kept thinking if I just stop by, when I'm driving, they'll be there. Um, but like even like I still have not managed to get into the store just because like every time I drive by, they're like, "Oh yeah, they're not in today." And I'm like, "But you said that they're here Monday through Wednesday, 10 to 3, and it is in that period of time," and they're like, "Well, he's on vacation today." It's like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah, it can be
well."
so hard. It can be so hard. I will say that in response to that, when I'm actually on, I mean, if you're local, it's different because you can just go back. But if I'm on a trip, I'll try to both call the day before, a few days before, and also the day of, and say, I'm pretty close, about an hour away, a few hours out. Is the person in today? Just to verify. But it is really hard to do that when you're trying to hit up, say, 20 stores in a week, because calling every person from the highway, on your headset, hopefully legally, in an area you don't know at all is logistically challenging.
Yeah.
So, but if possible, really good to check in advance for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, because like, for those of you that don't know, like, a lot of stores, like, they're run by one person, and they might not have, like, that large of a staff, and a lot of the times, they might have staff that can't make any choices, so, like, you approaching just some random staff, it's like, if you wanted to get your movie in a movie theater, you don't ask, like, the concessions person, they can't make that choice, like, that would be
Yep.
silly. Um, so yeah.
And on that note, Carl, I want to point out that I've had stores where someone orders on the spot, like within 8 minutes, they're ordering 8 games or even 32 games in front of me. That's pretty rare. But with an owner, they can do that. With an owner, a week later or a few weeks later, they can order. And I've had the same experience as you, where when I am in a situation where I can't talk to a decision maker at the store, I still treat them with a lot of respect. I still show them the full game. I still do a regular demo, but they have no authority. Hopefully, they can be my salesperson for me, but what can often happen is that sales then take longer to close because, the owner doesn't feel any personal connection to you. You're a random person who stopped by their store and showed something to their staff. And even if you made an impression, you don't have any sense of, oh, this is like a real person who made a real game and I like their game. That personal touch you have is totally missing. So I try really hard to go back to places if I can where I can talk to again, the decision maker.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about the personal touch because that is definitely, like, very important, like, in games, like, well, I mean, it's why we go to conventions, it's why we travel all over. Because like, when I get to, like, actually teach a game to someone, they might, like, remember me for, like, their whole entire gaming experience. Like, I've had people where, like, I taught them a game years ago, and they keep buying my games because they remember that I taught them that game and I was really nice or whatever it was. Like, I might not remember them because all the conventions are a jumble of, like, bits in my head now, but, like, people definitely, like, there's that personal touch, and, like, just, like, meeting people, like, I met Molly at Gamma, and now we're talking here, like, it's all those connections, which make it, like, that's why I'm in this industry, because I love that we can all just be in this industry together and help each other out, and it's really cool, like, we're not really competing against each other, we're helping each other out.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to joke that if you want to buy a phone, I have an iPhone, you're probably not going to get a Samsung. You need one phone, you need one car unless you're my dad's, crazy best friend who has like a billion cars because he used to sell cars. So most of us get one of these bigger purchases. But with games, if I like a certain, light, funny party game, I'm probably going to buy three more of that kind of party game this coming year. So if anything, it actually builds my interest in like a genre of games or in a publisher's games versus restricting my next purchase. So I would say, if anything, we are highly collaborative because if people like X and they'll like Y and your game is Y, then I actually might refer people to another game. And I've done that with retailers. I have referred them to, supposedly competitors' games because I'm like, hey, Wing It sold well. Brilliant or BS will probably do well at your store. And I have retailers who have bought a dozen games just because I recommended a publisher's first game. So it's definitely that personal relationship, that friendship that over the years creates a lot of power in terms of wanting to be in relationship with you or other publishers.
Mhm. So you talk about the personal relationship with the publisher. To me, that says that you don't just end it at that first time that you meet them. Like, how often do you talk back at them or like reach out?
So your answer depends a lot on whether they're a customer already or whether they're a customer in the making. So if they're going to become a customer likely at some point, I might call them once every week or two after visiting in person. Or if I feel like that's too much, sometimes I feel like, okay, they're just really busy right now. I'll wait a month. So I would say anywhere from like 1 to 4 weeks in the beginning so that they don't forget me from actually visiting the store or from meeting them in person at the Game Manufacturers Association trade show. Once they're a customer, though, if they've bought, four or a dozen games, if they need more, they'll probably reach out to me. But sometimes they just forget because think life is crazy. And so I would say every 2 to 3 months is enough that they'll, you know, keep you in mind and they'll know, oh yeah, the games ran out or the games are about to run out. I forgot to tell you. But it's not so much that you'll be annoying. I mean, if you think about that, even if I call every 2 months on the dot, that's only 6 times a year. That's not actually that often to talk to someone. And because I really emphasize seeing how they're doing, talking about things besides just my games, I feel like people also know it's not just like I'm calling to make a sale, right? Like I make sure to ask other questions, especially right now. I didn't always do this, but I've learned, especially with the pandemic, to just kind of check in how are party games doing? How did things go over the holidays? I know things are kind of tough in California right now. And so there is that personal touch. With my retailers who I'm closest with, I would say a few dozen of my retailers are friends on Facebook. And those folks I make sure to reach out to on Facebook chat just about advice about the industry or something in their lives. We often relate politically because we're kind of at the same end of the political spectrum. So we might chat about that. But just in general, I try to have, what I guess in traditional terms would be called like a marketing touch, even though I do not call it that. The idea being you are building the relationship beyond just a sale, right? So for example, this is kind of crazy, but to give an extreme example, when I reached out to one of my retailers about something kind of random this week, he said, "Oh, I have good news. Call me." And I was like, "Okay, I'm in class. I'll call in an hour." So I called him at like 9:15 his time, and he's running for Congress. We ended up talking for 3 hours about his campaign and his launch this Saturday, which was yesterday. And then we talked about industry stuff for a while. He also works at a Yellow, so I got to hear about, what's going on with the Yellow too, and with his job at least. And so for me, that's kind of like again, an outlier, but also like a very typical example in some respects that someone wanted to share something with me that was not just about his, life in the board game industry. Building up those personal connections once you've especially been to game or visited their stores is pretty easy actually. When I say easy, I just mean like once you've had, an hour at the bar with someone or a half hour chill conversation, walking between workshops or later at night just chilling, then it's a lot easier to have a relationship that feels like it's not just about the sale. And frankly, the reason a lot of us don't like the traditional sales model is it's just about the product and someone buying the product. That feels what we call really transactional. I don't actually want to have transactional relationships with anyone in my life. I would like them to have some depth. That doesn't mean you need to talk to an hour, for an hour with each of them. But at the retailers who I know better, stores, I visit their stores and we might chat for 15 minutes about my games and a half hour about the industry. So that makes a big difference in the relationship. And I guess to kind of circle back to your question again, I would say once they're customers, 3 months is probably a minimum. I sometimes break that, but it's better to be in touch every 3 months just to know like if they need anything.
No, this is all like very like valuable information. Well, cause like I haven't gotten into a lot of stores that way. Like I've just met a few retailers, but it always feels like kind of awkward. But if you do like as you say, like don't treat it as transactional. Like have other questions. Like you can learn a lot just by asking questions. Like where you give the example of like how are party games doing? Like um that's really important information to know. Like, should you keep making party games? Like, you can learn a lot, like, about, like, what you should do in the future, like, without, like, saying it that way, but, like, if you, like, find it hard to, like, interact with other people, like, think of it as, like, research and just getting to know people, and you can learn a lot, and you keep up that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually stayed at the homes of 3 of my retailers, and in fact, one of them offered for me to stay over even before I was working with this store, and I mean, that sounds crazy, but, like, having invites to people's homes, like, feels really amazing, and we get to know each other. I get to know their families. One of my retailers in the UK, who I actually wrote to ask a question that you had posed that we'll get to today, Carla, one of my retailers in the UK, we knew each other from staying over at another retailer friend's house in Las Vegas, and he was like, "I'm gonna be a better host than him." Like he was feeling like competition about how well he could host me. I ended up crashing at his place in Manchester, UK, this like adorable little town, actually 40 minutes outside the city. And we talked till 3 a.m. and I got to know his son a little bit, and just he helped me out a lot when Asmodee, my UK distributor, lost some games that we had. And so like it creates this friendship where like you do give to each other, but it's not because you're like just about trying to like help each other out in the industry. Like we actually really genuinely related for 5 hours straight. We were able to talk about life and politics and our families. So
Yeah, that is awesome. Um, so what are some things you do like when you can't like meet the retailer in person? Like either
yeah,
you can't travel there or, like you can't go to conventions. Like right now is kind of hard.
absolutely. That's really hard, not gonna lie. So I have been focusing more and more on retailers who I already work with and know pretty well. And I'm gonna talk about what you do if you don't have that. I have kind of tried to focus less on retailers that I know will sell like, 1 to 3 games that they'll probably get through a distributor, and more on retailers who have done pretty well with games in the past to see if they want to try out, our new one. In terms of the broader question, I did a I guess I call it an experiment um, that I wanted to pursue to see what cold calling certain regions was like when I wasn't going to make it to Texas, for instance. I have family there, but wasn't going to be there anytime soon. I wasn't going to be in Florida anytime soon. There are no cons there. I already, felt like I was doing enough trips. So at one point, pretty early on in my first couple of years, I called 30 stores cold call across multiple major cities in Arizona, Florida, and Texas. Oh, and a little bit in the Carolinas. And I still found that I had about a 50% conversion rate. So when I visit stores, it's a 49% conversion rate. When I call them cold call, the way that I did that always is that I know they're not going to likely buy a game from a sales sheet, especially without knowing me. Even the ones who know me don't necessarily buy from a sales sheet. They might buy because they trust my last game. But what I did is I would call stores in major cities. I would let them know how many stores we were in and how we done already, just purely like numbers focused, because it's like saying, hey, we've already had this kind of success, and kind of painting a picture of that success so that they can see, oh, so if other stores have been that successful, we could probably succeed with your game or games too. And then I offer them a free demo. And I put that pretty front and center because even though it could cost, in my case, I think well, for the smaller of our medium size of our games, Wing it probably costs about $11 or $12 to ship a game to a store. If they order even 3 or 4, that they're making up that cost, and the likelihood they'll buy a game without seeing one just from a phone call is probably pretty close to zero. I've never tried it without the demo at all, but I can't imagine why they would trust me any more than anybody else, other than the fact that I can say we've been in a few hundred stores. That's helpful. But I did find that some of those sales were generally smaller or they took longer. So it's possible it's just more of a process. That being said, if you're afraid of cold calling, just know something. Most people are, and it's really hard. But when you call them the second time, it's a little easier. Since you're calling and offering them something free, it's a little easier. When you call them the third time, a few weeks later, they start recognizing your voice and they're like, oh, like, I know you. Like, they even get friendly about it. So I had one retailer who used to joke that I called more than anybody he knew, but he liked it. I think he liked the attention. Like, you're telling a small retailer they're important too. So I feel like my stomach used to like churn when I would make those, and I don't have to make them a lot now, but I was for this period of time. But honestly, the fact of the matter is that they're used to that kind of call, and you're already sticking out if you're offering them a free game, and you're also sticking out if you can point to previous successes as well.
Okay. I
Yeah, other
mean,
than that, I don't have a lot of tips. I would say that I'm still visiting stores occasionally. I did do an Oregon trip in the fall, always masked, of course. They were really respectful about masks too. And I think that one shouldn't shy away from visiting stores right now if there are cities nearby with stores. Just, make sure that the person's going to be in. I had maybe 2 out of like 23 stores in Oregon where the buyer wasn't in. So that will happen. And in that case, maybe you can set up a Zoom or other video chat, demo for them.
have you had a lot of good response to doing the Zoom or video chat
I
demo?
have not had to do any yet, so I'm not sure how
Okay.
it'll be. Yeah, I've offered them twice. No one's taken me up on them yet, and I'm not hurt. I just think like, okay, they're really busy. But that's one thing is when you do get that in-person visit, they're less likely to be too busy for you, right? So because you've taken the time to visit your store, and I always make sure they knew if I'm coming from another city or another state. Like, believe me, they know. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing a tour of 34 stores in the Western Midwest right now. I'm actually coming from Brooklyn before, and so I make sure that they know, like, not to brag, but to say, like, you're important enough that I just went from, Brooklyn to St. Louis to Columbus, Ohio, or Cleveland because I care about visiting stores. So I kind of use it as a selling point too.
Mhm. Well, and it shows that you're passionate about it and like the whole thing about them being special, like going back, like a lot of stores are owned by one person. And if you impress that one person, they will more likely buy your game and tell people about your game because that personal connection. So you just
Yep.
have to like make them feel like they are indeed another human that you value, and it can go a long way.
Definitely. And I would say also that when you do have the in-person visit, just keep in mind the demo part doesn't usually last more than 15 to 20 minutes. Even with 3 of my games, I can do that in under 20 minutes. And I keep it short so that they know when they're showing their own customers how to play or how it works, that they'll be able to do that in about, a minute or two, because that might be all the customer will give them, right? You know, we all have short attention spans for, hundreds or 1,000 games. So a lot of the visit is often like them sharing about how their store is doing, or they'll, the ones who are really proud will give me a tour of their stores sometimes and how it works. They'll just chat with me about, industry stuff. So keep in mind that the visit itself is part of building, a relationship that means someone will pick up the phone later and they'll take my calls. It's almost never that someone won't take a call from me. And I think that says a lot to how this model works because frankly people want to talk. They're super friendly too. Sometimes they're busy and they still talk for 25 minutes. I'm like, they're busy, but like because I visited the store, they like want to have 25 minutes of stuff to share.
That's like so cool. I really think like what you're doing is really different and unique because like a lot of publishers I don't think like visit stores or go anywhere or even like try the cold calling. Like they might go to Gamma and then that's where it kind of ends. Like when I went to Gamma, I sent like emails to people like after, like maybe the night of or like after I met them, and they were like surprised, and it's like, what are people doing? Like getting these business cards, like and just never doing anything with it, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of not following up. I make a call, ideally within a few weeks, but it depends on how Gamma's went gone because obviously with the pandemic happening right after Gamma or like as Gamma was happening last year, I didn't call as many of my stores, but I called them later in the summer. And I don't know about from last year's Gamma, but from the Gamma before, I think I had a 62% conversion rate, which means, if anyone's not familiar with that idea, that means that of the leads I brought in, like business cards or other ways I brought in leads, 62% ordered at least once. And that speaks a lot to how the personal connection works. And I'll put in a plug. If anybody on here decides to join Gamma, $300. They are giving a great deal, I heard, on the first timers booth fee as well. It might even be free. In fact, I'll check. And one thing that Gamma is missing virtually, obviously, is the in-person connection at the bar. But when and if you do go again in 2022, and if they can replicate it in 2021, then same thing. Meeting at night when you both have a drink or grab a Coke or water, whatever. When you're both sitting around and just have time to chat, that is the time that some of my best connections are made actually, and are deepened as well. Not as much, not that you can't make good connections in the trade show hall, but remember there's always that physical barrier, that table between you, and you're in a trade show hall. So it is more about showing the game and sharing the game, and they know ultimately about you making sales, getting orders. But at night it feels very different. You're much more like on the same playing field. So one little anecdote that will help people remember that idea is in Gamma 2019, I met a South African retailer really late at night around the big bar and open area with couches in Reno at the trade show. And I showed him my games. That was in March. And a few months later at Gen Con, he sends me a message over Facebook chat to say, my distributors are going to be by your booth. Or maybe he stopped by and just told me that at Gen Con. So his main distributor for South Africa, Solar Pop, came by and signed us. It was because of one night at the bar at Gamma that happened. And so that personal connection makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that is like so impressive. Well, and like they probably don't go to every booth. Like they went to like probably specific booths cuz like you can't get like just the whole like different continents thing. Um they probably know your game you like you as a publisher like more than I don't know 50 or 100 of the other publishers that are also at Gen Con.
Yeah, for sure.
So other than the personal connection, like what really matters when you're trying to like show off your game or like get a retailer to buy your game?
That is a really great question, and I want to flag that it's an extremely powerful question. So, to show off the game and to buy the game, I'm going to separate those out a little bit. When I actually show the game, as I mentioned before, but I really want to emphasize it, I make the demos really short. Even if you have a really complicated game or a medium complex game, like say Kanagawa is I would call medium complex from Yellow. For people who don't know, you're creating the best painting show as a painter in your studio. When there are a lot of steps to a game, you can still summarize the purpose of the game and the mechanism in a few sentences. And keep in mind that whatever you share with them is something they may be able to share with their customers. And you want to make it really obvious that a game can be pitched easily to customers because it is extremely common for retailers to be hand selling your game, whether by demoing it or just talking it up. And so I try to make my pitches similar or the same to what they'll be doing with their own customers, right? So that's key. Quick, easy, fun. You can remember quick, easy, fun. What's this game going to be like? It's going to be easy to learn, or it might be like a little harder to learn, but like emphasize that like this is how you play the game, this is the objective, this is the mechanic. Also, be sure to start high level. Like, what's the point of the game? I say that as a publisher who has had people come and pitch games to me as designers, and they get into the weeds right away. That's for the most part not how they're going to be explaining a game at the store. Maybe for like a hardcore gamer, they might be getting into the weeds of the mechanics, but starting high level with the theme or the point of the game is important. So for Wing It, our first game, for example, it's all about coming up with funny, weird ways to escape disastrous situations. Can really explain it in one sentence. Then I might get into, using funny resources to tell a story about how you'll escape crazy situations. But even that's like another level, right? So that's one thing. Another piece I'll say about this is that you want to make sure that you share, like I said before, the successes of a game so far. So maybe that's, you've sold X many through Kickstarter, or you've sold to this many stores so far, or here's mentions, whatever successes you can point to. And giving numbers is important. I rarely use adjectives in my sales. This is super important. Why do I rarely use adjectives like this game is awesome or it's really fun? Because of course I'm going to say that. I made the freaking thing, right? Of course I think my games are awesome and fun. I wouldn't make them otherwise. But I'm sure everybody thinks their game is, hopefully, thinks their game is awesome or fun, right? So I don't use adjectives. I use examples of reviews. I use what other people have said about my game. I might actually quote a review. So for example, the hairy game lords, who are these hairy British men in England, said that our game had them laughing for over an hour. That's our game, the $1 Million Doodle. That is something I can quote. Getting reviews, even if you never make a sale out of the review, is really helpful because they can provide you with really important quotes that you can use to sell your game. I'm just going to move here for a moment. Okay. And then the other piece is that with sales, you want to make sure they know how to get it. This seems really obvious, but it's interesting that I've heard from some retailers how it's really hard to know, even from a website, how to get a game. In fact, we need to fix this on our own now. But when I talk to them, they know they can get it direct from our website with a code for 50% off. They know they can get it from these distributors. And they know that they can, call me for it. I'll put in the order, or they can, put in the order themselves. You don't often get into that till the end of a sales visit, but it's important to be able to share that right away. Now, in terms of like what actually makes your game appealing to retailers themselves, I'm gonna take my own medicine here and share some things from retailers. So one of my retailers points out that beautiful art is really important. That seems so basic, right? But it's something I wouldn't have thought of before. We have a really cool penguin. The penguin draws some people in. But if you have beautiful art, and especially a medium or complex strategy game, that art is what will get the person to come to the shelf and pick up the game. You have over 1,000 games easily in a good sized game store. What's going to draw people to yours? So gorgeous art, and this is from Kathleen Donahue as well, who's the only game store owner in DC, and she's clearly successful because she has a large staff and actually pays second or third highest rent in the country per square foot for a game store. She owns Labyrinth Games in DC. She points out that innovative, strong mechanics that tie in well with the theme, so making sure mechanics and theme are related. And then also just an interesting theme, like a theme that we haven't seen a million times, right? Like, no offense to anybody who likes pirates, but having a game about pirates or seafaring. I mean, it's not that it couldn't be an amazing game. It's just that it's a theme that's done a lot. Colonialism, done a lot, So if you can think of different themes that aren't about, the ones that have been done so many times, that's important. Another thing is having a demo copy is really important. They like being able to show the cards, to show the pieces if there are pieces, or the components. So I always offer a free demo. I know that's harder if you have a really expensive game, and I get that. The way to deal with that is to have a mini version of your game. I've even done that where I have like a small 10-card promo pack, or a little stack of cards that is inside of a pretty bag. So having like a mini version is a good idea. And then also, if it's great if it can be demoed easily, if they can hand sell it, that's also, they can sell it without having to hand sell it. That's really important. That's where the art comes in. Another big thing is, I don't have one with me right now, but if you have ever seen any games from Flying Leap Games, all of our games have on the back a 5 or 6-step summary of how to play. Retailers love this. And we got the idea from retailers. We weren't going to put this on the back of our first box. They love having a how to play on the back because it's a quick, easy summary of how to play so that their staff, first of all, doesn't have to memorize it, so that people know right away, am I going to like the mechanics? And just so people see how the game works immediately. When you don't have this, I'm less likely to buy a game, frankly, as a very frequent consumer of games. I am less likely to buy a game if I just don't know how to play, basically. Let's see. And then also, this is interesting. I have this from various customers, and I'm going to flag it. From Pat Fuge, who owns Gnome Games. They sell dozens of our game, Wing It, for example. He is a really well-known game store owner in Upper Wisconsin, around Green Bay area. And he will tell you it's really important that they can build a relationship with the customer through the game. So in other words, kind of creating a sense of bonding by showing the demo even, and making people laugh a little bit is important. But I've also heard what people say is about developing a long-term relationship with you. If you're a publisher, if you're a designer and publisher, or just a publisher, both really important roles, I would just say that they want to be able to know that there's going to be stock long-term. They want to be able to reorder your game easily. They want to know that, you're with at least one of their common distributors. Unless they need like several or like a dozen, they might just want to order through a distributor. So building that up is important. Yeah, so I think we flagged art and providing a demo copy and making sure it says how to play, summary on the back, pitching your game really quickly and easily so they know they'll be able to pitch it quickly and easily, and being able to build a relationship with the customer easily through your demo, and then building a long-term relationship with you as the publisher to be able to get the game again, and that they know you'll have consistent supply. So that's a quick summary of a lot of big topics.
Yeah, that is like so much like highly valuable information. Like, I don't really have anything to add to that because you went over like so well. But yeah, like beautiful art, thematic games, easy to play, like the demos, like all of that is so important. And if you have it all, then it should be an obvious sell, which is why you have like your really high rate of actually selling the games, because you hit every point and make them kind of feel like they can be successful. Like you give them everything they need to sell your game and be confident in it.
Yeah, I do want to say that there's an area we're lacking. I think that we're lacking now. So our newest game, the $1 Million Doodle, has much smaller picture of cover art. It still sticks out among party games because a lot of party games, if people on here have seen Super Fight or Cards Against Humanity, have like extremely basic art, if any art at all. Even Pitchstorm from Skybound, which also makes Super Fight, even Pitchstorm about pitching funny movie scripts, has like extremely basic art. I mean, it's definitely designed, but there's not much to it. we did more on our party games, and we're finding that Wing It sells itself a little better with the penguin than the $1,000,000 Doodle does with our little picture of a hedgehog jumping out of a toaster as a logo for a company. It's a little smaller. It's a little hard to like see like one image quickly. And just two or three retailers, we're hearing it's selling slower. And I think part of that is that we haven't had cons to promote it. Like we haven't been out at cons playing it with hundreds and hundreds of people, right? But part of it is definitely that like the penguin's sort of like big and flashy and it gives you like one main image to focus on. So I would just caution people, if you are selling party games or simpler games of any kind, to really focus on like one thing to look at. And if you're making strategy games, having that like beautiful, gorgeous, maybe even slightly complex cover art is good. And I think one of the top of the line I can point to in this perspective, in this area of games, the genre is definitely a Stonemaier games. They're known for really gorgeous, not too complex, but not really simple cover art. Like pure elegant cover art is really important.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that about like the party games being simple and like you can kind of tell like a party game when you see it. Or you should be able to because like if you can tell that it's a party game and people are looking for party games, they'll go for your game. And the same thing with the strategy game. So that was a really good point for you to make. Do you think that there's any kinds of games that are more or less likely to be picked up by a store?
That's a really hard question because most game stores sell such a huge variety. The kind of stores that pick up our games definitely have a family or millennial base, but like specifically millennials who want like something quick and fun to play with friends. So I think games that can be sold easily, again, will sell a lot. And also games that do something interesting and new but still recognizable, like using a quote overused theme is okay, but like maybe there's something interesting and new about the mechanics. So I think I know that one of my retailers who I really respect, Dave in the UK, is the one who I stay with outside Manchester. He's definitely known as one of the top voices in indie retail in the UK, and he loves the game Chronicles of Crime, for example. And I think that's a game that did some really neat things with mechanics. And I personally like have not. I mean, I have them in the pipeline, but I haven't actually made a game yet with really unique mechanics. And it's like for me, it's like the golden egg of game design is like being able to create a totally new mechanic. I would love that. So I think that in terms of what stores will pick up, something new and interesting, and again, like my other retailer mentioned, that strong mechanics, new interesting mechanics that also relate really well to the theme that go together. It'll just be easier for them to talk about, is what I'm assuming. So I think that's probably why she flagged that idea. And also, cuteness does sell. Like Bunny Kingdom has done well. Like let's face it, having little cute things does sell.
I mean, I agree with that. Like, if I see like cute like cats or hedgehogs or like penguins, like I can always like picture your game because like well of the games, penguins like Wing It, like that penguin is super cute. Like it's just adorable. Well, and also I have like a thing with birds. Like bird games are just my jam, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know this until I started like thinking about like why do I like Wingspan and all these other bird games so much? Like I don't know. Like we all have our like little quirks, I guess.
yeah,
Um
totally.
but yeah, cuteness.
It helps a lot. And beautiful things help. I mean, let's face it. Like I think that's less hand selling if you pick up. I don't know about y'all, but I definitely pick up things because they're beautiful at times.
Mhm.
So
Have you had any experience with, like, having, like, a advocate or proxy, like, help go to retailers for you, or has it all been just you?
I have gone on my own so far, but I have definitely thought about, you know, hiring someone down the line, like hiring specifically, I try to do this, hiring someone who shows a whole catalog of games. At the end of the day, right now, while I'm still full time, it makes most sense for me to do it because no one can sell your games quite like you if you really enjoy selling them, and I do. So I'm not working on that yet.
I do agree with that, like, the whole, like, no one can sell your game as much as you, like, if you do hire someone, if they're, like, showing off, like, 20 different games, they're not gonna, like, really love and be passionate about your game as much as you would be. Well,
Exactly.
unless, like, you're not an excitable person or I don't know, something like that. But like even though like I am not like very emotional, I can get excited about my own game because I'm so passionate about it. And like hiring somebody else is just it would be a lot harder to have as much success, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And that being said, if I go back to having another job at some point, I want to try at least hiring one of the people who's a rep for a toy or game company who actually goes around and sells, several companies' games, and just give it a go and see how it is. I mean, those reps do exist, and it's worth seeing if they're, even a quarter or a half as successful or whatever.
Mhm. So, do you have any experience with the tabletop cafes or like the restaurant board game things, like board game bars?
Yeah, the first board game bar I ever approached bought 5 almost right away. That was in DC. But they'll never order again is the thing for a bar because they're not selling. So I would say, tack that on to a visit to stores if you can fit it in, but just know it's not going to be a big, ongoing sales source of sales. I haven't done a lot of what I think you also might be mentioning, like going out to bars and just like teaching the game. I've done that a bit at cafes, but cafes, because they are so focused on the cafe part, they tend to have not so many games. I have one that's excellent at our sales too. I mean, they'll order by the dozen. Enchanted Grounds Cafe in Denver area. In general, my experience is to go into them with low expectations. Enchanted Grounds is unusual. A game cafe, you don't know until you have worked with them for a little while how much they're emphasizing the cafe versus the sales part. And I've definitely noticed that, like I mentioned with some primarily trading card stores that also have some games, some of these cafes will literally have like 2 small shelves of games. So if you think about the return on your time, you're putting the same amount of time into going to the store and pitching the games, but then they'll probably order like in the 1 to 4 range. And you might not even ever know how much they order because if it's small enough, they probably want to order through a distributor. So I think it's probably like, worth being on the list, but maybe as like if I have time to squeeze it in or if it's nearby a store. I have one, for example, in Texas where the game and the cafe are so close to each other, they build off of each other. That's helpful, but that's a pretty rare situation. So I would say emphasize stores a lot more.
Mhm.
Not because the games aren't important, they're absolutely fulfilling a great purpose, but a lot of people will go to the game cafe and just play, right? They're not necessarily looking to buy.
Mhm. Well, that is definitely a good point about how, like, if they have a side business, like, or like how much do they emphasize the side business versus the games and like trying to look there. Like, if they only have one shelf of games, they obviously emphasize the cafe more. But if they have like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 shelves of games, then that's probably a better bet. And sometimes you just can't know until you go there.
Yep, yep.
So, is there anything you would do differently if you could start all over again?
Oh, yeah. Believe me, when the pandemic hit, that became clear what we would do differently. So we had been mostly selling, almost entirely selling to retail stores and selling either direct or through distribution. And what I've learned more recently, we're mentored a lot over the years. We've been mentored a lot by people from Greater Than Games, which to me is kind of a gold standard. They have a big staff for a medium sized or to large game company. They've made dozens of games. Greater Than Games CEO and their marketing person are both friends of ours. And what they've taught us more recently is that they really emphasize the relationship with the distributor and trying to show the distributor how to sell their stuff and what to focus on and having meetings with the distributor regularly. And I focus more on direct sales and then selling through distribution, but through a consolidator. I'm bringing in the distributors now to my close network, to make direct relationships. Not that they didn't know us before, but now they'll be working with us regularly, not just knowing us, socially. And so for me, that's really important because it does take a lot of time and energy to reach out to individual retailers. And this way, it'll be more about the distributors working with them on our behalf, doing more sales, work on our behalf. And so I think one thing I wish I'd known earlier was that if you build that relationship up with a distributor really early, then it might mean less work in terms of bringing in new retailers. That being said, retailers also help me bring in the distributor. So it's not like you shouldn't emphasize the retail side at all. It still has really helped because a retailer in Australia got us into distribution in Australia. A retailer in South Africa, as I mentioned, got us into distribution in South Africa. Same for the UK, etc. Okay. The other big change that we're making that I wish I'd known about earlier is that Facebook ads are a huge way that board game publishers can choose to sell. I talked to 5 or 6 indie game companies from May through the end of the summer that were selling thousands and thousands of games. In one case, 60,000 in a year, which is crazy, through Facebook ad sales. I had no idea this was happening at that scale. I knew what happened through Kickstarters. I didn't realize that post Kickstarter was happening as much. And so now we have recently hired friends who came from Singapore to Gamma. They actually came because I posted on a Facebook wall, like, come to Gamma. And they saw it and came from Singapore. And we became friends out of this. And they are really amazing at Facebook ads. So we hired them to do that. I wish I'd known earlier that that would be a good sales channel to work on. To be honest, I had no idea people bought things from Facebook ads, let alone games. I just didn't know, literally. And in the absence of conventions, and with a lot of my retailers suffering still, and with shutdowns still happening in some places and people not going to stores as much, I will be honest, we just need new sales channels. And that's why I'm starting to emphasize trying to get a lot more Facebook ads out there in the coming weeks or so, coming few months, to see how they do and to basically be able to reach the consumer directly. And hopefully we can also then reach out to people who, for example, have older kids, like, because our games are for either people with teenagers or older kids, or they're for millennials, like people in their 20s and 30s, not married, not married or not with kids yet, rather, who still have time to play games because they're not taking care of a 3-year-old, and we need to figure out a way to reach those. So we have found that in certain areas of the country, it's just so hard to sell to retailers in some places right now. So this will really help us reach the consumer directly who does have the time of, and enough people in their life, in their inner circle to play games with. So I wish the big overall thing. What do I wish people told me earlier? Sell through Facebook ads or emphasize relationships with distributors. And those are other ways to sell.
Well, those are two like amazing things. So that's great. Anything exciting happening in the future with your game designs?
Yeah, I have 5 that are very early stage in the pipeline. One actually has almost to make people laugh. I'll show you what one of them, quote, looks like. I literally went in the backyard one day and I created most of the content for one of my new games coming out. The working title is This Marriage Will Fail. And it's about 2 different kinds of characters who you role play going to a marriage counselor, and one person thinks the marriage will fail and one character thinks the marriage will succeed. And you have to argue which one will happen and give reasons in like your 60, 90 seconds or so. So that's exciting. You'll have, for example, the Grim Reaper will be matched with a racist children's book author, or the world hot dog eating champion will be matched with the Loch Ness monster, and they're going to try to get married and see what happens. So that's one. Another one I'm really excited about, because I got my 11-year-old nephew, actually hired him to start working with me on it, is all about using the words of the wisest people of every era of history to answer really mundane questions of everyday life. So you're seeking the wisdom of the sages, everyone from Maya Angelou to Moses to the Buddha, to Mark Twain, all these sage advisors of different kinds, to answer questions like, should I have eggs or toast for breakfast? Or should I become a mime? Should I run away to the circus? And so you're matching funny questions, kind of like Jeopardy style. You get the answer and you have to figure out the question. So we're matching, see which mundane question can best be answered by certain wisdom of the ages.
Well, those both sound like really funny, and so I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to hearing more about those in the future.
It'll be fun. And I'm super nervous about it, but I would just say if anyone on here wants to join me in testing them, I'm nervous just because they're games for 4 or more people. And we don't know exactly when people are going to be gathering in groups of 4 or more people again. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's one of the hard parts about party games in a pandemic.
Yep. Oh, can I mention one other that I'm excited about?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. I know we're nearing the end of the time. I have been so excited to create a fantasy game. I will be playing all different kinds of world building games to help me learn, like games like Everdale and so on. The fantasy game involves what kind of world you would create if every time you daydream, you could build out a new world for yourself. So I noticed while doing something really boring one day, it would be great if I could just go to Narnia. And out of that, I decided to create a game. So basically, every round, players are adding a new element to the world they're building, and they're all building different worlds. For example, every round you create or get to choose from a certain kind of villain. You get your humorous sidekick another round. You get your mission another round. So you're essentially building, like, if there are 4 players, you're building 4 different Narnias at once, and you can also invade each other's worlds. And if you get killed off while daydreaming in your world, you become a ghost and you get new powers as a ghost, and you also lose certain powers. So that's another one, a world building game. I'm a little nervous about that one because I need to do a lot of fantasy novel reading of like the latest fantasy to learn how to kind of build worlds. So I'm excited about that one, but just nervous because it's a totally different kind of game for me.
Yeah, well, that also sounds really cool and different. It sounds like
Yeah,
you have a lot of really creative games coming up on the pipeline.
we'll see. Yeah, those are 3 of the 5 that I'm most focusing on.
Mhm. So, any last final thoughts?
Oh gosh, no pressure, right? Well, first of all, just remember this one thing. Anything you have done in the industry, someone has probably done before you and can coach you on it. There is, like, obviously innovation happening in the industry, but in general, we have gotten endless excellent mentorship from a huge range of people, mostly I would say small to large publishers. Everybody is willing to give you the time of day. Almost everybody will help you out. I do all my coaching for free. I've gotten most of the coaching I've had for free as well. So if you are a publisher, if you're a designer or another role in the industry, never forget that you can find someone out there to kind of guide the path and you don't have to make it up from scratch.
I mean, that's really good. Um, I still need to like reach out and find a mentor at some point. Like I keep wanting it, and then I keep um, chickening out. Like every time they have the tabletop mentorship program, but I've chickened out for like 5 years. So it's
Well,
probably
good news for you, Carla. I was going to tell you this another time, but I'm actually forming a group of small to medium-sized publishers to mentor each other once a month. I'm in a group that does this every other week, but we're from all different parts of the industry, and I wanted one that was really publisher heavy. So, if anyone wants to join, including you, we'll be, like I said, meeting once a month, and we'll all just kind of workshop each other's problems and help each other out.
I mean, that sounds awesome. Even just from a social aspect of meeting other people that do the thing that you do.
Totally.
So where can people find you after this?
Awesome. Well, we are most active on Instagram. So that is Flying Leap Games is our handle. Lesser active, but still active on Twitter. There we're at Penguin Soaring. Would love for people to join our Facebook group because we'll be making some cool announcements on there soon. And that is also Flying Leap Games on Facebook. So Flying Leap Games, Facebook and Instagram, at Penguin Soaring on Twitter. And then if you want to just get our really, really, really occasional newsletter, I mean, we're kind of lazy about email because we don't like email, and also because a lot of our retailers are overwhelmed by email. But if you want to join our newsletter, you'll get likely no more than 1 email a month at most. Then you can go to our website, flyingleapgames.com, and click on just joining the email newsletter. Oh, and also I should mention, if you are an entrepreneur of any kind, if you are looking to just learn about how people found and grow businesses, I'm in the pretty early stages of posting a series of over 20 videos that I did of from interviews with 7 entrepreneurs, mostly in the board game industry, but also outside of it, on flying leaps or big risks they've taken in founding a business. And so keep an eye on Instagram for the shorter versions of those, and we're putting gradually all the longer versions up on YouTube. So you get like minute clips on Instagram and YouTube, or sorry, on Twitter. And then YouTube will have like the full length edited interviews, never over 15 minutes, and then the 2-minute clips. And those are just like, how did people deal with huge risk? What risks have they taken that were, supposed to go south but turned out really well? And then they also do a little playing our latest game as well.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being here. I hope everyone has a great weekend. And if anyone wants to participate in the discussion outside the Sunday chats, the Discord is at weirddraftgames.com/Discord. So thanks
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks so much, Carla. Bye, everybody. Thanks.